Hello fellow humans and welcome to this week's shop review. Starting off with the Lost and Found, it is still the same as last week. The bundles on top are good, and then the Chieftain, the Type 57 and the MX M449 are worth it. You can ignore the rest of them. In the tank section we have the Super Conqueror, more on this vehicle later. The 11-1 is a horrible vehicle that you should not buy, even for the great price of 5.5k gold. The K91 for 10k, however, is somewhat solid if you are looking for one of the very few Soviet autoloaders, then this can be a good option. Do I really have to talk about this? I don't think I have to. Don't buy it. Then the double impact, and the only impact these will make is that now you're 29 euros poorer. The AMX City C is horrible, and it's always been horrible, and the Skoda T56 is a generic IS-3 type copy vehicle, where if you just get the Type 57 instead, you have a way better experience. And at last, the Steel Hunters are solid if you are into tank destroyers. To the events, and it is Christmas, because this is the Christmas event in June, and this time, instead of snow globes, we have Expo containers, but it's the exact same event. And those Expo containers, you can get the new object for 52k. I've played this vehicle about 5 times, and then I stopped playing it because it's incredibly boring and bland. Don't spend 150,000 gold to obtain this vehicle, because that's how much you have to spend, right? You need 10 Expo containers, and then 10 charms in here to get this vehicle, so on average, you need 15,000 gold for each Expo container, and then you need 10 Expo containers, so you need 150,000 gold. Have fun paying for that. However, at the end of this event, there is another new tank, the T42, which is what happened when the Pershing and the M46 Patton get in love with each other and have a child. That's what this is. It is a tier 7, and it is somewhat solid. The average penetration is pretty bad, but you have 225 alpha damage, so basically, if you've played the T26 Eagle, you've also played this vehicle. However, if you can get it for free, it would be a nice and useful addition to your garage. On the other hand, however, you can also get a Expo container at the back instead of the T42. And the Expo container does mostly contain newer vehicles. There are not a lot of really old vehicles in here, unlike the WZ120 and the T42, but mostly these are good vehicles that it is filled with, except the object. So it's a sort of good deal that you can pick from here. Obviously, you also have stuff like the Caliban or the Lanson, but overall, it is a sort of good container, which means if you can get it at the back here for free, it can be somewhat worth it. However, obviously, don't buy it because each of them costs 15,000 gold, and they're not worth that. Here we go with the Super Conqueror. It is a great entry-level tier 10 premium vehicle. Now with that, I mean that you shouldn't just buy it instantly when you play the game, because that's just a waste of money. However, if you have 4 or 5 tier 10s already and you're decent with them, so you're doing average damage, then you can consider buying this vehicle, which is very beginner friendly, I'd say. The biggest problem with it is the accuracy, because it's not really that greatly accurate, but it's okay. And obviously, I've put the black camo on it because this is the big black conch, because it is quite... Look at the size of this thing. It's massive, which can be a drawback, because obviously the bigger a tank is, the more surface area you have that the enemy can hit. And if you have tank destroyers on the enemy team, they will be doing that. That's kind of annoying. Now, in a game like this, my team is pretty spread out, which is good. But the problem is, the further you spread out, the harder it becomes to crossfire. Something that you have to keep in mind. You want to have the perfect balance between map control and fire control, right? You can control the map, but you can also help each other out if something happens. And you don't do what he just did and rush into 5 enemies at the same time. Now, there's a difference between doing that and playing aggressive. Playing aggressive means you take a forward position that is good, and then you play there, and then if you get rushed by the enemies, well, they had a good time. However, if you just see 3 dudes and you're like, must have, and you run at them, that's obviously not very helpful. Now, in the Super Conqueror, you can't do that anyway, because it's pretty slow for what it is. It's a heavy tank after all that weighs like 70 tons. So it's not great in that regard. But it does have HESH rounds at decent penetration. That's another nice bonus there. So in terms of tier 10 heavy tanks, this is one of the better one. It's, well, it's not the WZ111-5A. That's all you have to say at this point. But the question is, this, the Concept 1B, or the Chieftain? Now, the thing is with the Chieftain, as you will see very soon, because I've played this battle like 5 minutes ago, you will see very soon that the Chieftain is a vehicle that does require a lot of skill to extract the performance out of it that it has, something like a Leopard 1. Concept 1B is somewhat similar-ish to the Super Conqueror. So basically, whichever one of those two is cheaper is probably the one that you should get. Because in terms of performance, you're pretty much getting the same. However, mind you, the Concept does not have access to good HE rounds. So that's a downside there. And the head of the Concept is very pointy. So at the front, it's impenetrable, but as soon as you turn it, that's weak. And now, we are sort of winning as of this moment. There's a Yakpan 3100 still back there that is busy. And now, here comes the Chieftain. 1,000 to 700. And he shoots into the track, which is a bad idea because the Super Conqueror's track wheel is incredibly big, so it's very easy to miss the hull. And now, the Chieftain just decides to show me his ass, which helps. And now he's getting close. He's just trying, like, he's trying to get past, but all I'm doing here is blocking him with the front track so he can't turn. And I finish him off, despite having less hit points and less DPM. So the Chieftain does require quite a lot of skill to pull it off. But the Super Conqueror, if you're a new-ish player, it is an excellent vehicle to pick up. Now we get to the Tier 42, which is, to all intents and purposes, simply just the improved Tier 26 Eagle, as you can see right here. So, is this tank good, and should you pick it up? Well, I would recommend getting the Expo container first, but if you can get both, then get this vehicle as well, because obviously gambling is always bad under any circumstances, unless it's free. If it's free, you're not losing anything. That's the problem of gambling. Gambling, 95% of times, you will lose more than you gain every single time. That's how it's designed. But if it's free, you don't lose anything because you didn't invest anything. Well, you did invest time getting the container, but that's about it. So, it's fine if it's free. But you should never, under any circumstances, pay for the Expo containers. Because they're a bad deal. They always will be. They're designed to be a bad deal. Now this vehicle is sort of a weird mixture of, it could have been a Tier 8, and no, it's actually a Tier 7. Because it is pretty strong for what it is. Now obviously, I'm fighting a Super Hellcat here, so the bar isn't very high in terms of the enemy right here. However, can it compete with something like a CS52, which is a very solid Tier 7 medium tank in its own right? Well, yes it can. It is up there. It's not T20 kind of horrible. It's very decent. So, especially if you can get it free. Now, I would under no circumstances invest gold into obtaining this vehicle, because it would be a bad idea and just a waste of money. Or if you can get it for free, it's perfectly fine for what it is. Just like the CS52. They're fine if they're free, but if you pay for it, if you pay more than like 3k gold for it, why would you? It's a Tier 7. It ain't gonna make as much credits as a Tier 8. It ain't as good as a Tier 8. Why would you? If you can get it for free, it's a very solid vehicle that I can recommend picking up. 440. 440 euros is the price for 150,000 gold, and that's the amount you need on average to obtain this vehicle. Now obviously in the meanwhile you are getting other boxes and other vehicles as well. However, that's the amount you need to buy 10 of these each, because on average you get one of these in 10, and then you need 10 of these to get this vehicle. So 440 euros to sort of get there, and that's the average, right? You could not get a box for years in the first type of box, and then you get nothing, and you spend a lot more, and you still don't get it. I mean, there are people that are going to be insane enough to do that, obviously, and I can't stop them, because, I mean, intelligence is not transmissible over the internet. But this vehicle is bland. That's the only word I can really find for it. It's a very bland vehicle. It doesn't add much to the game, and to be fair, if you've played something like an ISA, you've kind of played this vehicle as well. It's a lot slower, though. And the armor of it, this is 180 penetration Progetto. I think that's all that you need to know about this vehicle's armor, that a Progetto with 180 millimeters of standard penetration is going straight through the side. So, at an angle. So, yeah, that's about all you need to know. And that's the lower plate. So, in terms of armor, what is that? So basically, it's pretty damn bland and not worth it. So basically, whether you have it or not have it, it doesn't really matter. It's pretty easy to fight it as well. The DPM is low. The alpha damage is fine. So overall, it is another vehicle added to the game that it's there, it's present, and that's about it. If you get something like a 50 TP, then you will have a very similar gameplay style of experience. Will not make a difference, and you don't have to pay 440 euros for it, pretty much. And but you can also get the tier 9 Czech vehicle and have a very similar experience as well. So basically, there's not really anything that you're missing. Now, if this thing would be sold for, let's say, 10,000 gold, like the K91 is, then we can talk about it, of course. But we always review a vehicle based on its value, not based on its performance alone. Because if you only review it based on its performance, then you could sell the Smasher for 30 million gold and you'd still recommend it. Because, I mean, it has the best performance, right? So, you always review at the value point. And in this case, the value is 0. So with that said, and that horrible disappointment, that is the Object 5. And with that horrible disappointment that this vehicle is, the event's pretty good, sort of, because you can get one box with one tank, go for it. But with this vehicle, you don't need it. So you chuck it into the shop for 10k like the Kennedy one. We can talk about it, but for now, we're not going to talk about anything anymore because that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. See you next one. Goodbye.